Hey there, Sofin here. Today I went and saw the Bob Dylan movie and now I want to talk about it. A Complete Unknown is the title of the film, but calling it the Bob Dylan story is way more accurate. It's a film about Bob Dylan's journey from being a complete unknown to being an international superstar. I chose to watch this film because of Timothée Chalamet. I've enjoyed the last few films he put out and decided to give this a chance despite my distaste for Bob Dylan. I don't know much about Bob Dylan as a person, but to me his songs always sounded like someone letting out one insanely long fart while a guitar plays in the background. Even though I don't like Bob's music, I found the film to be an interesting window into his mind that also covers a fairly exciting moment in his life. There's a good bit of meaning to be found in the tale, and it's fairly well executed. The story is based on a book written by Elijah Wald. The screenplay was adapted by James Mangold and Jay Cox. James Mangold directed the film, which stars Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan, Edward Norton as Pete Seeger, and Elle Fanning as Sylvie Russo. The movie starts with Bob as a fresh-faced 20-year-old arriving in New York and follows him for a 2-year period up until his blowout moment at the Newport Folk Festival. It's a drama that gives us insight into several of his major personal relationships and a musical that explores his early work and how his style grew with him. The film is only 2 hours long, and yet it manages to give us an in-depth look into Bob's personality while showing us how he grew in fame and giving us non-stop musical performances from him and other musicians around him. For anyone who likes music, this film is like a concert. There's a song every few minutes, and they're solid performances. They play Bob's music, Joan Baez's music, a few old folk songs, Johnny Cash shows up for a song or two, and they even have Pete Seeger strum out a few tunes. There's a huge variety, too, from folk songs to blues to rock and roll. It's full of musical expression. When the cast isn't performing, the story tends to get a bit dull. We see Bob hanging out with his friends and family and running into little conflicts with each of them. But things are fairly stable and mundane up until the finale when everything blows up all at once. We do learn a lot about Bob's home life and how he treats others, but it's quite slow. The story is also hard to get invested in if you aren't into Bob's music. Bob isn't a big personality, and the film doesn't give you any direction early on. You're just watching and hoping for some meaning to materialize. It does eventually, but it can be hard to pick out on your own. The drama part can also be frustrating. Watching Bob run away from his problems and act badly with little to no explanation is kind of boring. It isn't until the blowout moment that his motives are revealed, and while they do explain everything quite well, it doesn't make you think better of Bob or his actions. Cast-wise, the film has a ton of great performances. At the top with the most time, you have Timothée Chalamet doing a great impression of Bob Dylan. He talks in a mumbly, nasally voice and sings just like him too. He plays Bob as a shy person who doesn't quite know how to express himself outside of his songs. On stage, though, he's a raging hurricane that no one can look away from. Chalamet does great with the emotional aspects of the role as well, showing off a lot of chemistry with Monica Barbaro and Elle Fanning. Outside of Chalamet, there's a lot of colorful performances with recreations of various musical acts and famous activists. Edward Norton plays Pete Seeger, a mentor to Bob and fellow musician. Monica Barbaro plays Joan Baez and performs several songs as her. She's a wonderful singer who offers a more adversarial relationship to Bob. Then you have actors like Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash. He only shows up for a scene or two, but he's a divine gift every time he appears. He's funny, charismatic, and offers up a couple of great lines. Visually, the film isn't much to write home about. It's Bob and his girlfriend hanging out at their apartment, Bob playing a few gigs at a hole-in-the-wall bar, and a few major concerts. The drama parts of the story are quite mundane with a lot of basic locations and costume work. The musical parts are a little more dressed up, but still feature basic musical acts. You'll see the performer playing their instrument and singing at the same time and get a bit of the crowd reaction, but there's no big visual extravaganzas or effects. Visually, the film is a little boring. Sound-wise, the film is fantastic, especially if you like Bob Dylan's music. It has a ton of high-quality performances that play directly into the story. The music that plays in the background is also all original music specifically chosen to match the mood. You get to hear Bob Dylan's early works as well as see his progression in style and complexity, as he practices and gains new influences. You also get a number of guest performances that mix things up and keep it from sounding like a folk album. The music flows well with the story, bringing a lot of great emotions into the mix and seems to express all of Dylan's inner thoughts. It's both memorable and entertaining. Personally, I found myself entertained by the performances and fascinated by Dylan's story. He seems so mysterious and interesting at first, but the more you find out about him, the less you like him. He's just such a dork. I hadn't heard of the Newport Festival incident before, so this was all new history to me. I found it interesting to dive into that time period and felt that the movie did a good job explaining the event in a mostly unbiased way. What Dylan did was interesting, but also completely selfish in an incredibly arrogant way. It's also fascinating learning about all the people around Dylan. Like his brief relationship with Johnny Cash in the film seems so fun and wholesome. I'd also never heard of Pete Seeger before this, but now I have a whole new rabbit hole to climb down. The music was great, the cast did a wonderful job, and while the story does meander, it also has a lot of exciting moments. As for a rating, I'd give this film an 8 out of 10. Remember, these are just my thoughts on the film. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Bye-bye!